Get yourself in the lotus position, because I've got no plan, no pretense, and definitely no bypassing. I'm Josh Connolly, and this will probably be Dysfunctional. We are back with episode 3 of Dysfunctional. And when I say we, I mean me and every fucking voice in my head. So yeah, plenty to talk to you about again today, and we're going to get straight into it. There's a few things. We got plenty of questions that we'll try and get into as many of them as we can again towards the back end. But it feels good to be here now and in the swing of the podcast, being a weekly thing as often as I can. And even if I'm on the road, I was like thinking about it. There's plenty of pieces of tech and stuff now for me to be able to do this wherever I am. I'm recording this on the Friday. So this comes out on the Tuesday because I've got another busy Monday coming up. And you may, if you're watching this on YouTube, realize that I fidget quite a bit. I'm struggling massively with my back at the moment. And actually, I've just come from a session on Breathing Space, which is my online community. We meet every week on Zoom in various different ways. But we was talking about it in there, and we was talking about the ability to be able to like tend to yourself and how that isn't our natural response for a lot of people, a lot of us in there. And I think it's true for a lot of people. If you've grown up with any kind of dysfunction for varying different reasons, you may not have been tended to in the way that people in a more functional family, if that really exists, will have been tended to. And I certainly know for myself, I've had a bad back for a few weeks now, and it's something I'm getting sorted. But I recognize that at home, I am quite open about how much pain I'm in and how much I'm struggling. But I will always, around other people and in relationships to other people, play down the severity, play down the seriousness of what I'm struggling with, because I never want to burden anybody. And I always fall straight into playing a certain type of role around people. I don't want to I don't want to drag them down, or I don't want to make them feel bad. And so I always fall into this way and this role in relationship to other people of always like being good. And I see this a lot, I see this a lot in the spaces that I operate in. I think it's quite common for us to feel the need to present any of our struggles in a way that's digestible for the people around us. I think that's like a bit of there's social issues that play into that. Like, we sort of push people to make us feel more comfortable. Do you know what I mean? Like, even if you look at like the mental health conversation, for want of a better term, and I particularly do hate that term. But even when you look at the mental health conversation, it's still, we still only really celebrate people that have had struggles and are through them, or that frame them in a way that make us feel comfortable. There's still this sense that that if people aren't helping themselves, then why would we bother helping them anyway? And the key thing I think to understand in a lot of circumstances is, when you're really struggling emotionally, one of the things that you're really not very good at is helping yourself, right? So we can't be upset with people when they don't help themselves. Actually, that's not true. That's not true, is it? We can be upset, particularly when we love people. We can be upset with them when it feels like they're not helping themselves. And alongside that being upset, we can have compassion. And look, I'm talking about your normal people, for want of a better term. One of the topics that I'm going to talk about today is toxic. The word toxic, why I use that word and what it means and what that can lead into. But when we're talking about our average, people like us, like I'd imagine many of the listeners here are people that I'm involved in communities in. That's when I'm talking about people in that way, that's what I'm talking about. But just quickly on the back, I sort of recognize that as well. Our bodies are like so linked, yeah. So I get in this state where my back drags me down. I carry the weight of the struggle from having a bad back, and then that further compounds and makes my back worse. I absolutely believe that a lot of the pain that I experience in my back is driven by the ways that I feel, by the weight that I carry in my life. When I'm carrying that weight, my back feels worse. And I think the mistake that we make, particularly in Western culture, is that we take that and then think, well, it's not real pain. It's just in your head. You're making it up. And again, I don't believe that's true. I seriously believe that our mind and our body is so linked that the pain is real. The physiological effects on our bodies are real when we experience it in that way. And there's lots of studies, by the way, that you can look at. I did a lot of stuff. I was looking at the placebo and the nocebo. Shout out Rob from Uncommon Man, actually, who got me onto looking at some of that stuff. And there was a study. I'll talk about it. There's a study. This is one of the things that Rob showed me. There was a study on of a load of people, and I'm going to butcher it a little bit, but it'll give you the general idea. They got a large group of people to take a load of, I think it was paracetamol, ibuprofen, might have even said aspirin, right? They got a large group of people to take it. Now, half of that group were told that one of the side effects of taking this is that there's a likelihood that you might get some severe stomach issues. And the other half of the people, that group of people, weren't told that. And I can't remember the percentage, so this is what I mean when I butcher it. But there was a much, much higher percentage of people that were told that the side effect would be problems in your tummy that went on to have physiological struggles in their tummy. So they didn't just report issues in their tummy. The tests showed that their tummy had more issues. And that just shows you the power, like they call it the nocebo, but it's all placebo, isn't it? It shows you the power of the mind. And I think the opposite is true as well around the healing of that. And a friend of mine talks about the way that we speak to our body, because when my body feels like it's letting me down, the way that I speak to myself when my back is bad, like my fucking back, like getting me down, it's useless, it's like my body's letting me down, and I don't speak to my body in a loving way. Now listen, to some of you that might sound ridiculous and woo-woo, but I know for a fact, like, I've struggled with my hamstrings, and again, it's all linked, right? But recently I kept having problems with my hamstrings, and I was like so disgusted with my hamstrings. And when I changed my narrative and started loving my hamstrings and was like, my hamstrings are good, they know how to look after me, that my experience of them changed, my relationship with them changed, man. So yeah, look, that I would encourage everybody that has any struggle, and this is a problem, right? Let me just be clear actually about what I'm saying here, because one of the problems that we have in society today is that some people take when you say stuff like that and go, oh, he's like rubbishing Western medicine and thinks that you can cure everything with, this kind of miracle, loving yourself in that way. And I don't that's not what I'm saying at all. That's not what I'm saying at all. I'm saying that we have a lot more power in us than we know. If we're willing to listen to our bodies and work with our bodies, rather than treating our bodies like a machine and relating to our body like a machine, we know a lot more about what we need to do and how to do it, and we can have a lot more power over that when we see that. I think I might talk, I don't know if I recently talked about this, but there's a Damian Marley song, and in part of the song he says, "Are we born not knowing, or are we born knowing all?" And that really fucking sticks with me, because what he's saying is, are we really born not knowing anything? Or are we born with all of the answers to a lot of this stuff within our bodies? So much of what we believe and what we think we understand, we believe and understand simply because people that we feel know better than us told us that that is the case. Now, to live in civilization in the way that we do, right? To live in the state of the civilization, advanced civilization that we do, it's unavoidable, right? You have to have a certain amount of trust in people that know better. Otherwise, civilization wouldn't exist. And there has to be a recognition there that those that we trust, for many, many different reasons, to tell us what's right and wrong, don't necessarily always know what's right and wrong for us, right? That's not a conspiracy theory. I'm not saying that they're doing it on purpose, telling us the wrong information on purpose, and that they're all, that way inclined, and it's all a big conspiracy. Listen, I think I've talked extensively about that in the past, that there's probably a lot of that goes on. And then there's just science changes and evolves all of the time, right? Lots of things that we've believed in the past to be true turn out not to be true and turn out to be ridiculous, right? And one thing we do know is that, throughout the history of society, for example, petrol or gas, as you might call it, depending on where you are in the world, unleaded fuel used to be leaded, and it was killing people. And they knew way before they stopped using it that it was killing people, but they tried to push the blame and do it everywhere else. The same happened with smoking. They didn't admit straight away, smoking's killing people. They don't let go of that stuff easily when it's making loads of money. So there's the kind of one of the reasons why we can't always believe the information. But then there's other things where science just genuinely believes something and feels like it has proved beyond reasonable doubt that something's true, and then it turns out not to be. And so I do think there's a lot to be said for listening to our bodies without polarizing and saying, two things can coexist, right? We can be very pleased with what Western medicine has achieved. Lots of people wouldn't be with us now if it wasn't for Western medicine. And we can recognize the failings in Western medicine too. We can do both. I know people really struggle with that, and you've got to pick one or the other fucking side half of the time. But I really believe that we should always look to explore both and know that we're all different as well, right? So yeah, I don't know how we got there, just in terms of just talking about my back. But it was International Men's Day this week, so that was on Tuesday, and we up, we celebrated 3 years of Uncommon Man, which is the space that I run alongside two friends, Mark and Rob. We celebrated 3 years of that because we started it on Men's Day 3 years ago. And we did that with a day event. And it was amazing because I was able to bring my son, who is nearly 14, came along, and he didn't partake in all of the exercises, but I let him do some filming, and he's sort of leaning into that kind of stuff. He's very interested in the work that I'm doing now, which is really cool. And I never had a role model when I was a kid. I never really had male role models that I really could look up to. Of course, my stepdad, who raised us from a very young age, was a role model to me. But he's a very different man to the man that I am. He was always my stepdad. There was always a sense in my mind that he was my stepdad. I always had a fear and a feeling and a worry and a concern that he would leave. So the relationship was impacted as a result of that. And that's not because he did anything wrong, by the way. He was incredible. It's just the situations that we've faced in, the past experiences that I've had. Listen, I'm 37 now, and one of the things that I've learned from the men's spaces is how hard I find it to trust any men. And what I mean by trust is to be able to trust them, to be in a loving relationship with them, for them to be able to hold and care for me in my struggles. Fucking struggle like hell with it, man. I hide for many different reasons as a result of that. And so it was nice to have my son there and for him to be in a room with what I would say is like 20 role models, or 20, there was, I don't know, 25 of us there, 20 men looking at their stuff, trying to work on it, coming together, being vulnerable and trying to improve as people. We really lack spaces like that, and I'm really glad that for 3 years now, every month we have provided a regular space like that for our men to come together. And yeah, it creates like a lot of meaningful change for that as a result of that. And just really proud of my son to be in that space. We did some big breath works, and we did a big breath work, and like lots of men screaming and emotionally releasing. And for him to be around that and see that, I think is a really positive thing. And I think we lack role models. I think we lack role models in general for our young people. But with, focusing on men at the moment, I think we lack role models. You look at the rise of people like Andrew Tate, and I see a lot of like people talking about him online, but I do sometimes feel like there's a virtuous way that people do it. So I will see some, and I'm not digging them out here, I'm just reflecting, I'm not assassinating anybody here, but I sometimes get the sense that the men that talk about the hate for Andrew Tate online are sometimes doing it in a virtuous way to show I'm one of the good ones. Look, I hate Andrew Tate. And I think the way that you tackle somebody like Andrew Tate is you create positive role models. But positive role models have to see the truth of young boys' experiences. I've been having lots of conversations this week with a lot of like my corporate clients that I work with. I've done a couple of like sessions where I've created some discussions for men and boys. And men, my experience, still really struggle with feeling like they should be the breadwinner and they should be the provider and all of that kind of stuff. And there's like this virtuous change that's happening over here, and then there's this reality. And somebody like Andrew Tate gains momentum because that virtuous space that talks about it over here shuts down any difficult conversations that we need to have. What a lot of people have done is like they will polarize it. I think anything that we say that we then say makes you more manly, this is my opinion, is problematic, because I don't line up to a lot of the things that it is to be a man, and I struggled throughout a lot of my life because I thought it made me less of a man because I wasn't those things. I thought my high emotional sensitivity made me less of a man. It didn't make me less of a man at all. But if you start to say that being emotionally strong is more manly, then of course it's going to be problematic for somebody who's not that, because then they're going to think that they don't weigh up to being a man. So the conversation is like, we can look for trends. We can recognize that men have a tendency to be more one way than another in any certain circumstance. But it's problematic when you then say that makes you more manly. And listen, I see a lot of that going on in the space, the kind of redefining what it is to be a man. Why don't we just define what it is to be a human? Why can't we create a world where or a society, I don't know about the globalization of stuff, actually. I think cultures and different cultures are important, actually, because they challenge us. So don't create a world, let's create societies and demographics and groups of people where people just get to be whoever they want to be and don't feel pressured to fit into some kind of box. That's a big problem that I see, is when we try and redefine what a man is. Now, when you take something like being the breadwinner or being somebody who is quite stoic and doesn't give off any big emotions, like some of the problem is that people can't go, yeah, that's okay. If that's who you are, that's great. Doesn't make you more of a man. Doesn't make you less of a man. Doesn't make you toxic if you want to be in a relationship where you are the main breadwinner. Like, if you're in a relationship with somebody who wants that too, the fuck's wrong with that? It's not toxic. What's problematic is when we suggest that being one way or another is to be more of a man or to be more of a woman, because that's what creates the problem. My problem wasn't my sensitivity. My problem when I sometimes feel shame because my wife is more assertive than me in certain situations. The problem is not that I'm not as assertive as my wife. That's not the problem. The problem is that I exist in a society that makes me feel because I'm not, then it means that I'm less of a man, and that just ain't true. And so we need better conversations, because we're trying to pretend. Look, here's a truth that's difficult, right? And this is what I mean by difficult conversations. For a lot of boys, most boys, I don't think it's all, I don't know, whatever, but a high number of boys, when they start going through puberty, all you can think about is sex. That is the fucking truth of what happens when you go through puberty as a boy. So we need to stop stigmatizing that, because they're watching porn, all right? These young lads, they're seeing a lot of it. They're highly exposed to it. And actually, I don't think there's anything wrong. Well, it's a whole nother conversation that you can debate about whether that's right or wrong, right? But again, like the issue is that nobody's coming in and letting these young people know exactly what porn is and the realities and the truth. If we can't have proper, decent conversations with young people in general about the realities of sex, right? About the fact that, like, when you're at that age, you are looking for it, you do want it. If we don't have proper conversations, then surely there's a little bit of our own responsibility. It's on us a little bit when they're going out and not acting in the way that we want them to. And so when we have this conversation over here and we're restrictive and we're like, you shouldn't sexualize, like we say you shouldn't sexualize women, right? I'm telling you now, at 14, 15 years old, as a boy, if you are a straight young boy, it is very, very difficult to not do that. That's just the reality. So if you're over here saying it's bad if you do that, and then Andrew Tate's over here saying it ain't, and by the way, let me radicalize you into some more extreme views, don't be surprised when people go over there. So you can stand virtuously over here and say Andrew Tate's bad, never sexualize women, don't do that, don't look at them in this way. You can do all of that over here if you want, and you'll get lots of plaudits and you'll be seen as a good person. Or you have the truth, the difficult conversations. Have those truths and difficult conversations that are more like, here's what I know what it's like to be a boy. And I'm a straight man myself, so I have to apologize if my approach to this is of that ilk, right? It's because I don't have experience in the other way. I would imagine my best guess is that other sexualities still feel very sexualized when you're a boy at 14, 15, and into your adult years. So we need to have difficult conversations. The conversation perhaps could be more in line with, we know that you think this, we know that this goes on in your head, and in order for us to live in a society and to be respectful to those women, and to be respectful to whoever we are feeling drawn to sexually, this is how you act. Have these conversations, recognize it, and then try and act appropriately. Shut it down, make it bad. And this is what I feel like is happening in general, by the way, with even what we're seeing in politics at the moment is that over on this side here, it's become so virtuous, where you have conversations with people and you think, you don't think that. Like, what you're saying sounds good for the group of people that you associate yourself with, but I know you on a day-to-day basis. You don't actually live in line with what you're saying, so it's virtuous. So when it's virtuous, restrictive, and not based on truth over here, these people in the middle here will be easily radicalized by people over here. So Andrew Tate in the instance of the male stuff, but we see this play out, I believe, in like the race stuff as well. People that get radicalized over to the far right is because they have genuine fears here, and they're labeled as a certain way for having genuine fear. And when you try and suppress someone's fear and tell them it's not valid and it's not real, and it makes them a certain way because they're feeling their true self, then they are easily radicalized by the people over here. So when we're over here, we need to be less virtuous and more driven towards truth. Let's find the truth. Let's find the truth and have those difficult conversations, and know that some of those difficult conversations don't need to play out online. They don't need to play out on LinkedIn because they're not easy, and that's not where they should play out. Let's create more spaces where they have the opportunity to play out properly so that people can grow and learn. And we owe that to our young people. We owe that to, I'm talking specifically about boys and men here. And one of the things that make talking about men's struggles a little bit difficult at the moment is when we are talking about the struggles of those that identify as men, we have to separate that and recognize it's not a competition. So if you say that men are really struggling with the aging process, because that's something that I do, right? Let's use that as an example. I recognize that socially it is much harder for women. There is much more pressure on women socially in terms of how they age. Like, I've heard lots of different women talk about a sense of feeling like they become invisible, and you can see it, right? That like men have a tendency to, what happens to them in the aging process, we see that as it makes them societally, what am I trying to say here? Socially, societally, like it's not seen in the way that women are, right? It's not. So all of that is true. And when I express that I struggle with the ways that I look as I'm getting older, I'm not saying I've got it harder than women. I'm not talking about it in relationship to how women have it at all. I'm talking in relationship to who I am in the world today and what that feels like to me. One of the hardships of being a man is that you're not supposed to care about what you look like, even your weight, yeah? All bought and paid for, or like comments will be thrown out about men's weight all of the time as well. And again, look, I'm not saying that in relationship to women, whether it's more or less, but as a man, that's like, I struggle with that. I struggle with the weight thing. I always feel like I'm fat and I'm overweight. I'm never happy with what I look in the mirror. I'm getting more lines and wrinkles in my face as I get older. That makes me nervous. I don't like it. It terrifies me. The idea of my hairline receding scares the shit out of me. It makes me feel uncomfortable. I don't like it. But there's still a sense that, but well, you're a fucking bloke. Get on with it. That's the truth. That's what people think. That's what people see. And yet we do struggle with that. I think we do struggle with that as men. And so like recognizing these is important. And just lastly, I wanted to touch on, this may or may not surprise people to know, but I talked a little bit about this on my stories on Instagram recently, but I am not particularly liked in the men's space. A lot of people that do men's work have a lot of negative things to say about me. They talk about, that I am keeping people in victim mode, that which we're going to talk about in a minute, but that labeling people as toxic is bad, and like you need to be able to reframe it. You can't stay in the problem and all of that kind of stuff. And look, here's what I think, man. Firstly, let me just acknowledge a couple of the parts of me that show up when this happens. There's a big part of me that's sad, that wants them to like me. I want them to like me. I want to be accepted. I want to feel part of that. I don't like that they think that about me. I want to be seen and part of them. I don't want them to think that about me. Then there's another part of me that thinks, fuck them. I'm going to make them all look stupid. Let me try and, even now, I can feel that part of me going, now tear them to bits. Now make them all look fucking stupid and show that you're better than all of them. And I can see that part of me. There's a part of me that wants to rebel anyway. And if they did accept me in, wouldn't accept it and would then rebel again so that they're against me. So I recognize that there's that part of me as well. But listen, I think that when you create spaces for people where you say, listen, show up exactly as you are. It's okay to feel however you feel. Let's create this space so that you can explore it, talk about it, be open about it, be true to yourself and what you're struggling with and have a space to talk about that. If you're bypassing that, if you are somebody who's like, no, let's reframe it and let's turn that hate into love, toxic positivity bullshit, then you are going to be very uncomfortable being around people that create spaces for you to be authentically true to yourself. Listen, I do not think you are supposed to feel good all of the time. I've just showed a couple of parts of me. There is good and bad in me all of the time. My shadow is there. There's different versions of me that exist. The work here is to not make those shadow parts go away or anything like that. It's about loving them and giving them all space to know that they all play a role in my life. And I genuinely have to be careful to not lean into this part where I'm trying to one-up them men. Because I've done that online. You'll see me doing that online. I do try and one-up them. I recognize that they don't like me. And that they sort of ostracize me as a little bit, and then I want to one-up them. I want to work really hard to make them look fucking stupid, so that to make me look the better one, right? I do that. I can still see that that's in me now. Even now with what I'm saying, I'm trying to fucking do that. But let me take a breath. It is my truth to say and believe that what I've always aspired towards and gravitated towards is people that go, here's where I'm at. Here's what I feel. I don't need to change it. I don't need to make it better. I'm just going to be safe and comfortable in that. And for me, that's truly the work. And when you can get comfortable with that, you'll stop bypassing. You'll stop trying to pretend and portray yourself to be a certain way. Actually, no, you won't stop, because I've just highlighted that it still does happen. But you'll be more comfortable just being yourself, man. And I am, despite everything that I've just said, and this is the thing, right? All of these things can be true. We can have contradicting emotions and contradicting views and thoughts on things and still know that all of those things can simultaneously be true. If you can't sit with that, then you do the fucking work. You do more work. And that's what I think makes some people uncomfortable around me. And listen, just to be clear, they might be right and I might be wrong, by the way, yeah? Or we're probably both right in our worlds. Do you know what I mean? No, but I'm fucking right. But this is what I mean. And this is why you're not supposed to be liked by everybody. And this is why, people want you to be true and authentic until your true and authentic self upsets them, and then they want you to change because it's making them feel uncomfortable. I believe when you really get along this path, when you really get along this journey, which sounds a little bit arrogant in itself, you'll reach a space where you feel safe being you. And it's okay if people don't like you as a result. And I really feel like I'm more there than I've ever been. And that's why I'm sort of able to, or I'm exploring and doing this podcast in this way with got a few little notes here, but with not having a script or anything like that, and really allowing you to just get a center into my mind. And I always say to people, people say to me, people quote me back to myself sometimes. And I'll be like, what, who said that? And they're like, you. And I'm like, I said that. And they're like, yeah, no, I don't even know if I fucking think that. But I'll say what I'm thinking, and then I'll dare to be wrong, and I'll dare to change my mind, and I'll dare to be challenged, and dare to see if I have a new view. And that's what it's all about. Anyway, coming on to the next topic before we get on to some questions. I wanted to talk about why I use the word toxic. think it's really important to get onto this. So in many respects, what I'm talking about with the types of parents that I'm talking about in most cases, I'm talking about covert narcissistic people. Now, I don't use the word narcissist because, well, I do use it sometimes, but I sort of steer away from using it because it's a diagnostic term, and then you'll get loads of narky. I'll say unfiltered what I think, and then I'll try and formulate it in a nicer way to not upset people. One of the reasons I don't say the word, or I steer away from using terms like narcissist, is because they're a medical term. And if you use them, the narky fucking medical people, the narky psychologists, not all psychologists are narky, but some of them are. And the narky ones will come for you saying, are you able to diagnose people with that? And I'm like, listen, I don't give a fuck if some of these people have got a diagnosis or not. I fucking know when I'm around one. I know in my body, and I think people that have grown up and lived with them and have a level of sensitivity, they know as well. Call me arrogant, call me what you want, but stay away from the word narky, and then not narky, from narcissist. Then those narky people like that won't come for you. Yeah, or they will come for you, but you give them less ammo. But probably the more main reason why I use the word toxic and maybe not abusive, for example, because most of what I'm talking about is abuse. Actually, all of what I talk about is abuse. It's because I think that most people that need to hear some of the things that I talk about wouldn't say that they grew up with abusive parents, because that feels like too much of a stretch. It takes a long time to realize, wow, what I experienced was abuse. So when you say toxic, it's a more broader term, and it opens up space for people to be able to come in. But I did look at the history of the word toxic, because it's always interesting. I love it whenever people do this. My Gabor loves to do it. Then he look at the history of words. So to copy him and to do that, I've looked at the history of the word. So originally it was to do with, where does it say? In ancient Greek literature, the adjective toxic derives from the noun that is to arc, and that means to use a bow and arrow, right? And then it was taken on by medicalized. It was used as a medical term. The military department. So, despite being used by the military department of archers, the medical context of the term is that a substance has the characteristic of a poison. This concept of the term survived until today with little differentiation. The ancient Greek medical literature gave the answer about how this term received its medical meaning. The physicians and pharmacologists of those times pointed out that it was a custom to dip in the pike of an arrow in a poison before it was fired against an enemy. The main scope was to injure the enemy in order to be killed, not due to the wound that was provoked, but a cause to the symptom of the poisoning that were presented after the hit. So when you look at it that way, right, I'll read that again. The main scope was to injure the enemy in order to be killed, not due to the wound that was provided, but a cause of the symptoms of the poisoning that were presented after the hit. And when you know, you know. If you've grown up with a toxic parent, or you've lived with a toxic parent, that's very, very fitting. Yeah, I think it's very, very fitting. It's not the act of causing the wound, but the infection that it leaves behind. And that's what that's what happens when you grow up at the hands of a toxic parent. That's exactly what happens. It's the infection that's caused. And like, they may create small visible wounds. You know, we talk about like death by 1,000 cuts, but it's not the wound that they create. It's the way in which it's delivered. It's what they dip it in before they do it to you. That's what causes. It's the poison in their words. Their words create the wound, but the poison in the way that they're delivered is what leaves lasting impact on you. When you start to see it in that way, you start to realize that the term makes perfect sense. People get upset because they say, you know, you can't label a person toxic. And I'm like, well, fucking why not? Like, to be honest with you, like, I don't get that hung up on it. Like, if you want to call somebody, if you want to change it and say a parent that has toxic behaviors, then do that. I don't really care. Like, what I find bizarre is that what I'm talking about is a very real issue that affects people on a larger scale than we wish to believe. It helps people to be able to talk about it. It helps them to be able to have a label that helps them to understand their experience. And of all the things that I talk about, from people being sexually abused by parents, financially abused, emotionally abused, physically abused, all of the stuff that I talk about, you're getting hung up on whether I call them a toxic parent or say it's a parent that has toxic behavior. Like, I think you've got a problem. I really think you've got a problem if you're struggling with that. Of all the things that I've said, if that's what you're picking out, I think you have a problem. And I think it's to do with toxic positivity. The reason people don't want to say toxic parent or label somebody as toxic is because they want to keep on their rose-tinted view of the world. Yeah? If you want to keep your rose-tinted view and say, I don't know, Jimmy Savile wasn't toxic, it just his behaviors were, then you fucking crack on and do that. Yeah? And you live your life pretending that we live in some kind of fucking spiritual realm where everybody's love and light, just making silly mistakes. That ain't the world that I live in, man. It ain't the world that I live in. I have met people and have known people, and we can all be sure that there are. Jimmy Savile died a toxic person. He was a toxic person for most of his adult life. And if you're upset that we're going to lay, and I'm using him as an extreme example, but you make no fucking mistake about this. You make no mistake about this. The toxic parents that I'm talking about are like it throughout their whole child's life. From the moment the child is born to the moment the parent probably normally dies first, throughout that whole lifespan of that child into their adulthood, this parent is consistently and constantly toxic, abusive, manipulative, and horrible. And if you find that hard to believe, well, fucking lucky you. Lucky you. Because I'll say it clearly because I believe it's that clear. And I know that toxic and horrible people love people like you who want to believe that everyone's love and light and all that stuff. Now, I'll say this again, and I've said it before. Do I believe that people could change? Yes, I absolutely do believe that people can change. Do I think it's the responsibility of somebody's child or adult child to help them change? No, I don't. If you've been toxic and abusive to your child, it is fucking your responsibility to go away, do the work, and come back when you fucking changed. And that's not to say that you won't still have slightly toxic behaviors. We all do. Yeah, I'm a parent myself. I wouldn't want you to come and watch me parent 24/7 because you'll see a load of my toxic behaviors come out. But I'm working, and I'm working on it, and I'm not consistently toxic and horrible. And I'm sorry if it makes you feel uncomfortable that I label some people as toxic. But that's the truth. It's the truth of the reality of the situation for some people. So I will continue to label people as toxic. And if they change, I'll stop calling them that. I'll stop calling them that. And just to reiterate quickly, there is a difference between people that are have a lot of toxic behaviors and a toxic person that I'm talking about, right? There is a difference. And if you've never experienced the type of person that I'm talking about, just good for you. Good for you, and stay the fuck out of it. Is it Brené Brown that says, don't take advice from people that have never been in your arena? If you've never experienced what it's like to have a toxic parent, yeah, why don't you stay out of it? I don't mean you have to have experience of that necessarily being your parent, but if you've never loved anybody or seen it play out, stay out of it. All right, we're going to go to some questions now. I think we're there. So I'm going to start by reading this one first here, and I've not previously read these. I just put them in a thing, and then I'm going to read them out. Have you ever heard of a mother trapping her 15-year-old daughter in a domestic violence style relationship in her family home with an 18-year-old who was blatantly threatening to kill himself every time I tried to end the relationship. My mother did this to me, and I was wondering if it was one-off situation or something you've heard before. I'm 47 now and estranged from my parents and most of my siblings. It's a long, ugly tears story, but writing this has been the most helpful way for me to heal and gain a more objective view of what happened. And my, oh my, how that links to what I've just said. Like, this person has grown up at 15 years old, and you best believe this, that there are parents out there who would facilitate that relationship like that of a 15-year-old with an 18-year-old if they felt that it would help them, if that toxic parent felt it helped their cause, if they felt it helped them keep this child or their friends or their partner as a supply towards them, they'll do whatever they fucking have to do in order to keep a supply. So I can't say to this person that I've directly heard this exact experience, but I will validate to you that I have absolute no doubt that that is a possibility, that that could happen, and how awful that must have been for you. So thank you for the question. I'm going to delete that one so that I can go on to this one. Here we go. At the beginning of the year, I cut out my toxic parents and I have very little contact with my sister and brother now. I know this is what's best for me, but how do you cope with the loneliness? I'm also struggling with making space for how my siblings feel in this situation. One is in complete denial, the other tries to people please everyone. It's hard making space for their feelings when they aren't facing any truths and I'm always the villain. By facing my family dysfunction and creating boundaries, I'm now portrayed as the villain. How do you cope with this when you know it's so wrong? Listen, again, let's just firstly start by validating you've called yourself the villain. We often talk about people being the scapegoat when you are able to see truth. And it's very similar to what I was talking about previously with the men that don't like it. If they don't like being around truth, if truth makes somebody feel uncomfortable, rather than dealing with that discomfort, they will make the expresser of the truth the problem. They will scapegoat you. They'll make you the villain. So well done for you for holding boundaries in the face of that. It's very difficult with the siblings. One of the chapter in my book, when we look at like healing my relationships, is I think it's really important to, the only thing that you can do is take responsibility to what you need out of your siblings. You deserve more from the people around you, right? But are they able to give it to you? And if they're not, then like you say, one is complete denial and the other tries to please everyone. It's hard making space for their feelings when they aren't facing any truths. If they can't do both, then maybe you can't be there with them in their feelings, and that has to become one of your boundaries. I mean, it's hard and it's not nice and it's not ideal, right? But this isn't an ideal situation. And then as for the loneliness, I really believe in community. One of the things that I'm most proud of on my socials and on my social channels like that is that I feel like the space has become a bit of a community, even in the comments section. But like, we have our breathing space online. You should come and check that out. But it doesn't always have to be a community of that nature. You know, gyms, clubs, whatever it is, find ways to get out. We need in our world more than ever to find community. It's one of the reasons I'm starting these spaces called Belong, where we're trying to make accessible community for people so you can go and meet other likely minded people. And that's really, really important to me. So yeah, thank you for the question. I'm going to do one more here. Oh, it's a voice note. Let's go. Let's put it here. Make sure the volume's right up. Okay, here we go.
Hi, I have a question for your Dysfunctional podcast. I'm wondering how you would interpret this situation. So I'm finding it difficult to navigate a situation where my siblings have chosen not to continue a relationship with me because I've taken so much needed space away from my toxic parent and we share that parent. My siblings are kind people, but still very much under the spell of the toxic parent and all of the lies and the victimhood that they portray. And they literally lean into that victimhood in order to make me the villain in this. I love my siblings very much, you know. I would love nothing more than to have an open and honest conversation with them, but one in particular has said they won't speak to me until I make up with our parent. I feel like I'm grieving for what I thought were strong sibling bonds, but now are clearly not, and also for my children who are missing their aunties and their cousins. Mostly, I did this, the estrangement, to protect myself from my parent, and I can't go back into that dysfunctional situation until I am ready. it feels like from all angles, whatever I do, there's ongoing suffering. It'd be interesting to know your perspective on this, Josh. Thank you.
Firstly, really powerfully and well articulated. It was on 1.5 as well. Just so you know, just to speed up the way that we listen to it. Listen, I think this is really, really common. I think it's really, really common for this to happen with the siblings. I really respect the fact that you've said that you've had to take this decision for you, and I think that you can be confident and proud that you're able to set that boundary in that way. Now, with the siblings, one of the things I talk about in the book is getting clear on your rights. And I may have even talked about this last week, but it's really, really important when we're trying to navigate difficult family relationships, is being clear on what is okay for us and what's not okay for us. And so, like, it's a real shame that one of your siblings has said to you that they can't have a relationship with you while you don't have a relationship with your parent. Like, it's really difficult. If you can have a conversation with them and get them to a place, it's like, I don't want to give too much advice, but I just want to validate how hard and horrible that must be for you. It must be really difficult. Really difficult. But you have to be clear in your rights. You have to be clear in your boundaries, and you have to be clear in what's acceptable for you. This is again, when you talk about these toxic parents, it rips families apart like this. It makes them untenable in many instances, which is horrific, and it means estrangement happens to good people. And listen, I think you can communicate with them. If you can try and communicate, look, I would love to be able to have a relationship with you. I'd love to be able to have it free from the relationship with our mum. I need to be able to do this for my health and my well-being. I just can't have that relationship, but I'm willing to work with you and meet you halfway in many other respects. I just can't have that relationship for the sake of my own well-being. And if they don't accept that, then it's something that you can revisit regularly. But your grief makes total sense. Living grief is probably the hardest, one of the most complex, hardest types of grief, when you're grieving relationships with people who are still alive. Very, very difficult to navigate. So yeah, I just want to show you some love on that front. And I don't want to pretend to, there's part of me that's trying to formulate a fix for you. And I don't want to formulate a fix that I don't necessarily believe exists. And that's a difficult and horrible truth. So I'm sorry I can't do more for you in that way. But listen, I really feel your pain, and I hope you've got people around you that understand, because that's important too. Okay. I think we're somewhere near there. I forgot to check the time again, so I've got no idea how long I've been here. Deep again today. Deep. Can't even remember what I talked about. But what I do know is that I'm Josh Connolly, and this was definitely dysfunctional. I did tell you it would be dysfunctional, so thank you for sticking around till the end here. And if you have enjoyed this podcast, then please help me to grow Dysfunctional by sharing with your friends on social media. You can find me at Josh_FFW. And then wherever you're listening to this or watching this, please make sure that you've liked and subscribed, left us a 5-star review and a comment if your platform allows it. And I'll see you on the next one.